Hey all, welcome to the fourth real leadership lounge. Again, we are trying to ignore the first one, but just keep mentioning it. So the first one where we had Carl Tinian and then Jeff and Rumke Fountain, we had Maureen Menard, and today we have the brain behind it all, that's Steve Mayers and his beautiful wife, Rite. So we very much look forward to hear from them today. We just want to remind you, and especially today, since I call them our leadership gurus. But we will open up for questions. We've done that every time, but very much so this time. So throw your leadership questions in. And as the talk is going on, and there's things that come up and questions you might have from your setting, please just post them and you will see we have somebody filtering them. So we will try and take as many as we can, especially in a later part of this live session here. Yes, so welcome.
I'm ready to go.
You're ready to go, Johnny. That's good. Johnny is sitting in Northern Ireland, and we have Steve and Rite in Malaga, and I'm still in Denmark. So this is all very exciting. Hand it over to you, Johnny.
Okay. Well, sorry everyone. This has been a smooth running machine for the last 3 weeks, and then about 20 minutes ago, I realized we had no internet on our base. So I've come into our flat here and rearranged, so it may not look as ornate. I don't know. Maybe more so. I don't know. But I think we're good to go. So yeah, this has been a privilege, I think, for the last 3 weeks to do these interviews with just really great people, and it's a real privilege to have Stephe and Rite joining us all the way from sunny Malaga, and Stephe and Rite, I think many of you will know, but there's probably some who don't. So for those who don't, they're a brilliant couple who for the last nearly 15, maybe 20, nearly 20 years have been running a retreat center in the south of Spain, really with a strong focus on leadership development. And if you go there, you will encounter the most amazing hospitality in the world. Well, you can't really go there anymore because they brought it to an end, which is maybe what we'll talk about in the next hour. But if you had gone to one of their leadership development courses or base leader training or couples retreats or wives retreats, all kinds of coaching retreats, all different kinds of things they did, you would have encountered the most amazing hospitality, and you would have seen servant leaders who, at a time in their life when they could have been hanging up their boots and just kind of gazing out at the sunset, they decided to create a space for hundreds and hundreds of leaders to come in the last 15 years and get high quality coaching, leadership training and experience. And I would say probably in my 25 years in YWAM, there's no one in the world, I think in the world of YWAM, that I would trust more as a leadership expert, maybe is not the right word, leadership mentor and leadership, someone who has deep experience and maturity and insight to pass on. No one more so than Steve. And Rite is there all the way along, giving just brilliant kind of insight and perspective, creating this hospitable home and environment. And so it's really great to have them on the Leadership Lounge. And Steve was the chairman for YWAM Europe for much of the last 15 years. Before that, he oversaw the work in Western Europe. Before that, in the UK and Ireland. Before that, in Scotland. And then before that, there were pioneering bases and teams and rehab ministries and all kinds of things. Rite has a whole ministry in preschool education and a real ministry in training people in doing that. So there's all kinds of ways that we could take the next hour. But I just want to say thank you both for all the work you've done over the years, and thanks for joining us here.
Thanks, John. Thanks for not building us up too much. You know.
I wasn't prepared. You know, I just been running around trying to find Wi-Fi. So, yeah.
Very kind. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Actually, we should thank you for inviting us into this and allowing us to work alongside you in really launching this ELLC. A bit later on, we want to hear, how you got there as well. But for now, maybe you could just kind of map out your YWAM journey just a little bit. how did you get to where you are now? And Rite, for you as well, I mean, how did God lead you to work with children and education, preschool training, and especially for the poor? You know, we'd just like to hear just a little bit of your journey.
You starting? Is it a team time?
A team effort.
Team effort. Probably for both of us, good old summer service is our launching into the mission. And that always whets your appetite for more. So we ended up, I obviously was in another nation. I did my summer service in Canada. Well, I don't even want to say the date, but it was 76, Montreal Olympics. Oh gosh, so long ago. And I really longed to do something more with YWAM. Always had a heart for missions. So I thought, well, this sounds like probably an organization that would be a good fit for me. A lot of miracles, but anyway, a year later, I ended up at Homestead Manor, and Steve as well. In those days, those old days, you kind of did a year together, which, as we look back, we think, wow, that was probably for us really beneficial to have one full year, same group of people. And I think it gave more time.
So that was DTS and SOE back then.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was our kind of beginning thing. And a little relationship thing seemed to sort of crop up. That lots of people get good mileage out of telling the story. I'm not going to tell it.
Back then we had an approved relationship. Once approved, you were then special.
You were very, very special indeed. Yeah, it worked on a lot of pride and brought a lot of humility in our lives through that time. But we were married in Canada, and we wanted, I think one of our cries was, Lord, teach us what. We long to be able to be a blessing to others, be a blessing to your kingdom. And I would not advise this. This is a not advisable kind of a procedure. But we just said, what can we do as we're here in Canada before we probably end up in missions? So we opened up, we thought a discipleship house using the kind of the model of YWAM Homestead, thinking we'll just have, you know, young people needing help, coming to live with us, really a community place of change and seeing people, really find their footing in God. Well, we had every kind of person that other particular denominations or ministries did not want because of their issues and situations. And
dropped off at our door.
Literally dropped off at our door. And we had, just to say, no experience. We're not from those backgrounds, our home lives, stable, pretty secure. And suddenly people were showing up in all directions. So that really launched us into, I'd say, opened up a lot of different, maybe desires and longing in our lives. We really learned how to love people at a very different level than I'd ever experienced.
So then we got a call from Lynn, and he invited us to come back to England. So we prayed about it, thought that was a good idea. So we sent in our application and then got the return letter saying, sorry, we're full. But we're going to Scotland if it's okay. You can do a DTS up there, and then you can come back down to England. Well, we went to Scotland, staffed the DTS, and a month in, felt the Lord saying, commit yourself here. So that was, we thought we were going to be there 3 months and ended up being there 26 years.
Wow.
So that was the story short. And through all the years, there was different leadership opportunities that we had, from national leadership and then on to UK and Ireland leadership and Western Europe and Europe, as you said. And it's been a fun trip. We wouldn't change much. There's a few things maybe, but God's been good to us over that time. Learned a lot.
I think quite a few people might have read books by Richard Rohr. I think Carl Tinnion referenced him the other day when we interviewed him. One of his books, I think, Falling Upward, I presume you're kind of familiar with it, Steve, is this idea Richard Rohr talks about of the two halves of life. The first half of life, kind of this period of time where you're becoming aware of who you are, and essentially you're self-centered, and kind of God made us that way, we have to discover who we are before we can love anyone else. But the second half of life is when you actually know who you are, you have a strong identity, a healthy identity, and you then become other focused. I wonder if you could just kind of detail for us a little bit what that's looked like in your life. Sorry, there's someone outside. You can mute me in a second, Martin, when I get the sentence out. Tell us what those two halves of life look like for you, Steve, like, and Rite, both of you. Like, what's the difference between the 25-year-old self and the self that's now?
Yeah, at 25, you don't feel like you're being selfish. It's an identity kind of time where, so we had all these experiences. We started a mobile team. We started an urban team in Edinburgh. We then started a rehab and moved into this national leadership, as I mentioned. And of course, there was all kinds of opportunities, and it snowballed. We had people wanting to come on staff, and we didn't have enough room in the base, and so we moved them off to the next town. And that's just how it went. And and I was involved so much in getting things moving. Of course, then kids come along, and that first half of life is probably the busiest time for you. Yeah. So it starts off with a being part. There's a discipleship element in there, and you're learning a lot. And then you get into the doing, and it's extremely busy. You're just making it through the day, and every day seems to be exhausting, especially when you've got young people around, and you're up in the night and you feel tired for years, it seems. And then you come to the second half, and I think God deals with issues that haven't been dealt with earlier on. Yeah. Takes you a little deeper. I think certainly for me, the whole emotional intelligence side began to kick in. And in LDC, we talk about kind of a wilderness phase that you go through where, there's lots of questions. You feel like you've fulfilled a lot of the vision already. And now, what next? And what is the passion on your heart? And, where are you going? What are you doing? You've fulfilled so much of what you wanted to do. And that's where you tend to go a little deeper. And there's more of an intimacy that comes. Your prayer life takes on a whole different shape. And your passion then gets clarified. So for me, it was in 93, we went to a Floyd school for 7 weeks. I think it was the only one he did. And out of that, I met a guy from Navigators, and he gave me a vision of doing a master's degree in leadership studies. And it brought a clarity to my calling. And from that point on, I had an understanding, okay, this is what God's call is on my life. This is where I'm going to focus. And it helps you, to zero in. And second half of life then just became so much easier and more relaxed. And of course, you're now investing in others rather than trying to build your own kind of gifts and identity. Much more relaxed in who you are.
Maybe I could just add too, even with your own personality, that comes, of course, with its incredible strengths, but also tendencies. One of the things I would think in my own life is I'm an ENFP. I'm very fast, very impulsive, very quick to make decisions or move forward. I've not been great at consultation, especially in that I'm thinking that early part of my journey in leadership. And I realize that I've seen a shift in that slowly but surely, where, my opinion, my viewpoint, the things that I feel so strongly about, I don't have to convince everybody in the world to hold on to those as well. I can be a peacemaker. Probably for me, I think that a verse that describes it, I had to write it down today because it's been really a life verse for me. So, but the wisdom from above, I'm going to call that the second half of life. It's Jesus' wisdom. It's always pure. It's filled with peace, considerate and teachable, filled with love, never displays prejudice or hypocrisy in any form. It always bears the beautiful harvest of righteousness. Good seeds of wisdom's fruit will be planted, and peaceful acts by those who cherish making peace. And I think that's shifted for me. And not that I've been a person to make war, but I realize that there's a greater gentleness. You're not in such a rush. You're willing to wait for some things. It doesn't have to happen this instant. And I don't know when that happened. You kind of don't wake up when it's there, but you realize maybe over the process in your 50s, and as we moved into our 60s, I saw a change there. And it's really, that's something to look forward to for younger leaders. I think sometimes we look at aging in such a negative viewpoint, but actually there's a greater sense of the divine peacefulness in our lives. Not quite that rushing and pushing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I suppose the other thing to say is, Richard Rohr doesn't describe it as in 52 equal halves. You can move into the second half, I guess, even in your 20s, but usually, I suppose, in your 30s, 40s. For you two, who were the influences that you really looked to over the years as you developed as a couple, as fathers, mothers, leaders? Who were some of those influences in your life?
Yeah, back then when we came into YWAM, you were, dumped in the deep end, and if you swam, you were okay. You were going to be a leader, and so mentoring was not really thought about. So I can't say that we had people kind of hunting us down to say we would love to help you. But I pursued some people. I think not so much in the early time. We just took initiative and did stuff initially. But then when I took on the national leadership, I felt totally out of my depth. And Lynn had offered for me to come down to YWAM England and be a part of the team and kind of listen in. So initially I thought, well, that seems like a waste of my time and costly. But as soon as I kind of felt overwhelmed with all that was happening, I phoned him up and said, yeah, mate, can I take you up on your offer? And that turned out to be the best kind of mentoring, because it wasn't formal, but I was watching, I was in the midst of it, watching how they made decisions and how they prayed together. And yeah, we could share our lives and I could ask all my questions. So probably that, in that environment, that was wonderful for me. So Barry Austin there, who I've done a lot of work with over the years, he was on that team and kind of took our pastoral times. And then Lynn with his vision and development of that vision. I learned a lot from these guys, and guys like, you probably don't remember Oliver Nyumbu.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah,
and of course Lawrence Singlehurst, who was the national leader. I learned so much from them. It was amazing. I just soaked in. And then Mariette, I invited up to Scotland and learned a whole new round of stuff in terms of spiritual leadership. So for me, those were the main people.
Okay.
I'm privileged actually to be mentored in that way.
Yeah. No, I always tell people Barry Austin was my dad's best man in 1966 in New Zealand. But so the question, we've got a couple of questions that we try to ask each week. And I suppose maybe one of the most important questions, but also difficult to ask people, is that vulnerable question of is about mistakes. What in your life, if you reflect on a real mistake that you made, that you realize other people can also make, and that we could learn from, what would that be, do you think, in both of your lives?
Yeah, I had such a long list here. It was just choosing one to share, or a couple. When I first took on the national leadership, within the first month, I made a huge mistake. We had the DTS was just about full. It was just about to start. And I had this visit from this pastor, and American pastor, and he came through and said, I'm sorry I haven't been able to go through the right application, but my daughter is desperate to do a DTS, and could you accept her? And I said, well, normally we have an application process, but he was pushing and pushing, and I was a bit insecure as a leader. And so, I basically was manipulated into saying they would. And just as he was leaving, you know, he shakes my hand and leaves kind of a note in my hand. And I could, you know, I felt awful at that point and thought I probably made a mistake here. And, you know, he left money with me. And as soon as the DTS started, I knew that I'd made an error, because this girl was a troublemaker. They were looking for somewhere to kind of drop her off and needed someone to help her. And I won't go into all the things that happened, but it came to a point where I needed to ask her to leave. Now, that's the last thing I want to do, but it was causing so much trouble on the base that I did that amidst much tears. And then her dad got me on the phone, and I had to hold the phone out here. It was so loud what he was saying to me. And basically he was saying, you are never going to lead again. I am going to tell all the leaders in Youth with a Mission, right up to Lauren Cunningham, what a terrible leader you are. And you are going to be ruined and destroyed from this point on. And I put the phone down and I was shaking. I thought, oh dear, what have I done? Of course, I should have spoken to him, you know, when I first saw these issues arising, but I didn't do that. And so it was a total shock for everybody. So the process is so important. And of course, then he was going to talk straight to Lynn. And so he spoke to Lynn. Lynn got me on the phone, and I thought, I'm just about to receive, you know, my orders to leave. Of course, Lynn supported me, and you know, I think that was an incredible blessing for me to have that affirmation from a leader when I have made a mistake and should have done it a lot better. But that got me on the road to making mistakes. Probably soon after that, I made the next one, which was come under pressure from somebody to be released into leadership of a team. And this person was at me every day. As soon as I walked down the stairs, they were at me saying, you know, it's time for me to be released. You know, God's spoken to me, giving me all these words. And I kind of got worn down over the time, and then just let him go. And again, that was, I had the next few years to kind of sort out my mistake of releasing too early. And then wrong delegation over the years. I mean, I could tell many stories about wrong delegation, but especially in a national role where you delegate to somebody who has a specialized calling rather than a generalized calling. You know what I mean? So they were specific, and in this particular instance, their heart was for church planting, and they wanted to take everybody in Wyoming, Scotland, down a church planting road, which they didn't really want to go. So it was very difficult. And you can never really tell that early on, but you know, I should have asked a few more questions and had a lot more discernment. But yeah, a stream of mistakes like that cause some problems. Yeah.
Rite, have you ever made a mistake?
I told you the personality type I am, Ronnie. Have I ever made a mistake? Maybe I'd made similar with Steve, but maybe a bit more on a personal level with family. I think that it's a challenge when you both have, as a couple, a lot of pioneer apostolic gifting, longing to see new things start. You're pushing at all ends. Obviously, I was developing preschool, and that continued on to then doing all kinds of training. Steve, at the same time, was also involved in a lot of other aspects of teaching, and part of our lives too. It wasn't necessarily always our choice, but we moved constantly. It was just one house after another. We have 3 kids now at this point, and places just sort of were no longer available or being demolished. We had apartments that were going to be knocked down, and we were pioneering in the city. And I think I look back now, and at one point I asked somebody who was a very, very capable teacher. I've been leading the preschool at that point for, I guess, about 7 years. And I knew she could do this. But what I didn't realize, you know, if you're the pioneer, people have looked to you as the team leader, to just ask somebody once, oh, look, I'm thinking it's probably time for me to really encourage you to take this. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. Well, of course they're going to respond like that. So instead of pursuing that, I just plowed on and carried on. And I had a very real thing happen in our family. I'm embarrassed to even say it, but it's good to say it. Our youngest was 4 at the time, and he was just unwell. That's all I can say. He just was unwell. Finally, I took him to the doctor, blood test, not eating, lethargic, just poorly in every way. Nothing in the blood test, everything's fine. And this is, of course, discouraging me. But what that was just the start of discouraging me. I realized there's something here that perhaps I don't know about. My good old mother, who's just was a very wise woman, she says, tell me all the symptoms. She's a nurse. And she was very quiet for a few moments. And then she said, which, oh gosh, just about killed me. I believe he's looking for his mother. He hasn't had her for a long time. Pardon? What are you saying? You're saying that he's depressed? You're saying that I've been on the road too much? What are you saying? Yeah, that's exactly what she's saying. Boy, I'm glad I have a mom who can speak her mind. And that night I just spent time with the Lord. I said, is this right, Lord? Have I been pushing so much that I've not been aware or attending to our family needs in the midst of already a very chaotic, full-on schedule? Should I have made more effort to have said, I'm passing this on, I'm taking time? Well, he says, never tell what you did next. Remember the impulsive part? That's not gone yet. But the impulsive part, I go to work the next day. I am clear of my agenda. I don't even ask anybody. I put this beautiful woman in the middle. I get my team around. I say, we are going to pray for this woman today. Let's believe God. Seriously, it went people had words. It was almost like it had all been prepared. I mean, you're not supposed to do that. I know
Don't
that.
do this at home, folks.
Don't do this at home. But I should have been more active and not allowing this to get this difficult. And you know what? I did that. I left and I said, I'm taking time out. In 1 week, he was better. I thought, don't ever let me have to do something like that again, where I'm just not attuned to sometimes, you're attuned to so many things, I think, in that period in your 30s. There was so much going on in our lives, and yet I wasn't noticing things that are most important. So that was a terrible mistake. Terrible.
Thank you both for sharing that.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I must say that it's deep, it's vulnerable, and it's terrible to say, but at the same time, it's quite comforting, to hear that others are making mistakes and just realizing that we're all learning, in the process. But thank you so much for sharing that.
That's how we learn the most, I think, through.
Yeah. And then daring to share them, Yeah. But we know that you recently have made a major decision and shift as a couple when it comes to your ministry. I don't think your what has changed, but at least your how in some ways have changed. In no longer running the retreat center, it came as a shock to me when I heard that. It's like, what? You can't do that? That's the place we meet, as leaders in Europe. But what made you make that decision, and how did you do it? I'm very interested in the how as well, because I know there was a little bit of a community process in that. I'm aware of the Quakers. They work with something called the Clearness Committee, where they actually bring in close friends and leaders, people around them, when they are to make a major decision, and they are kind of asking questions. So it's not I think oftentimes in our part of the world, it's like, it's me, I have to make a decision about me. But we all live in community and in family. So I know that you did something quite unique, and would love to hear more about that as well. So, yeah, would you share with us?
Yeah, there's a number of elements that kind of fed into the decision. So it just wasn't a thing. I think the first thing that happened was I had my personal assistant leave, which initially brought more work onto my lap, and various key people left, and so we were kind of struggling as a team a little bit. And I think one of the things that had troubled me was that, you know, whatever I'm doing, I like to be able to see how it can be multiplied.
Mm.
I can always remember Lauren coming when we were first starting ministry, and he got us to introduce ourselves and say times 10, you know, so with the idea, whatever we're doing, times 10 it.
Yeah.
It never left me. And so I always wanted to multiply that. And I looked at the Leadership Retreat Center and realized this is a hard thing to multiply as it is. You know, different elements of it could be multiplied. So the debriefing that Franciscan Burns have taken off to Germany, that could be multiplied. You could multiply teams coming in for you know, team building. We had individuals coming. You could run seminars, and any base can run all kinds of seminars. Various elements that we were doing, but doing it all together in one package just, I think, was wearing us out. So when we were doing the practical work and the spiritual input, yeah, so that was happening. And now on top of that, I have this kind of 10-year rule. Well, it's not a rule, it's a that whenever you've been doing something for 10 years, you've probably given your best to it. And, you know, unless something radically changes, a change of role within that, you know, it's going to be more of the same. And so all that was happening. And what happened next?
Well, maybe I could just add a little piece in there. It got us chatting with good friends. He's a clinical psychologist. We've really appreciated this couple. They've been in our lives since pretty much since we've been in Spain. Younger than us, sharp spiritually. And they've been talking about some of the tools that they were using. And one of them was the insight process, which is really very much what you were just saying, Toria, of inviting people who know you well to be a part of it, who actually know the retreat center. So yeah, amazingly, we had people available to join.
Yeah.
What I just wanted to share, and Steve can kind of finish off with what took place, was that they gave you pre-work that had to be done. Well, I was in Cambodia for 2 weeks in that November, just before we're supposed to be having this insight time. So I sat one Saturday morning, I'm in a kind of a hostel. They never put us in a hostel, but they'd lost quite a bit of their property in Siem Reap. So I'm in a hostel, and I'm sitting there just looking out over at sort of this, it was a pool, it was a garden. It just that it fits in so well with what's been going on with the word of the Lord right now. Sitting there looking, thinking, gosh, I can hardly see, what a mess. And I started to do this pre-work. And you're to start with a lectio to Psalm 139. All I had was that one phrase: you see me when I travel and when I rest at home. That's all I had. That was it. That I just couldn't get over this. I don't know whether I was happy about it. I was wanting to cry. I was excited because I thought, yeah, the Lord does see me when I travel. Everything I do here is in his kingdom and glory. It's not about me. But then the part when I rest at home. And I just said to Chris, my wonderful colleague, oh my gosh, when I get home in a week's time, there's another training, another course that we at our house we used for Deepen, and it's just going to be full of people. And I keep thinking, there's no rest at home. I don't go home anymore. There's no home. Well, that seems an odd thing to say, doesn't it? But it was the fact that probably the space between our travels and then our next events, they overlap now all the time. So I never came back to just being able to kind of unpack, catch up, be able to be part of my world there. It was full on, oh, tell us what's going on in Cambodia. I'm an extrovert, but I started to, they were wearing on me. But as I'm sitting there mulling this over, filling in all these questions, I'm watching, and all the pruners come out. They are hacking down this forest, trees left, right, and center. And I'm not a pruning person. I'm a gardener. Steve takes those shears and he prunes. No, I don't want to hurt them. I'm protecting them. I just think, life, don't be so hasty to cut off. But these guys are brutal. Of course you have to be. It's tropics. They're brutal. Suddenly I realized, oh gosh, is this John 15 being demonstrated? It's like my vision. Light started coming through, and I was so touched. Wow, there's light now That's what I'm envisioning, Lord, with this insight process. Some pruning.
So the hard thing for us, though, was, it's one thing to prune off dead wood. It's another thing to prune off, a fruitful branch.
Yeah.
And they took us through this exercise. It was like a palm tree with all kinds of branches. And on the different branches, we put the most, all of our priorities and all the things that God had spoken to us. And we were to circle. We just had so many that we could circle. And we realized that all these other elements seemed to be more priority than the retreat center. And we kind of had a revelation at that point that God had something fresh for us. And even though it was painful, it was a bittersweet time to close that. We knew that there was something fresh and new, and more fruit was coming. And it's only now as we look back and we see, a re-pioneering of all the B2Bs around the world. And, it's been an amazing time, actually. It's freed us up. So taking one role out and freed us up to take on something fresh and new, which would never have taken place had we, still be running the retreat center. So it was difficult, but it was right, and it was confirmed with this team. And boy, that we've done that with a number of other people now. At these 2 days, we call them 3D retreats. Actually, this book, we'll do this early. This is one book that's been helpful, Pursuing God's Will Together, with Haley Barton. And she gives an example of a church that she's working with that goes through a challenge, goes through change, transformation, and becomes a real community in making decisions together. And it was I think we need to see much more of that happen. Certainly we were blessed and affirmed in that process.
Wow.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
I just wonder, Steve, for you specifically, I think one of the things I remember hearing you, I don't know when the first time I heard you share it, maybe 5-10 years ago, was just referring to a kind of maybe a common trap in YWAM, and probably a lot of organizations or churches, is where you start out with a kind of a calling and a ministry, but over time you accumulate roles, and before you know it, a lot of your identity has become wrapped up in, I am the director of YWAM Ireland, or I'm the, of course we don't use the word director, but the same ego is the same. And I wonder, could you unpack some of that about the difference between roles and kind of ultimate calling and ministry, and the trap of kind of falling into finding identity in your kind of position?
No, you said it well. I think it's very easy for us to take on a role, and that becomes our identity, and that's different from a calling. That's a role is taking on like a base leadership or a team leadership. It's a function of leadership, but that's not our calling. Our calling is to something specific that God's put on our hearts, that is creating, blessing and fruitfulness out there. And I think sometimes what happens is that because our identity is wrapped up in that, it's very difficult to let go of it. And so people stay in the role too long, and the gap gets bigger and bigger, and then it's much harder to actually recruit somebody into that role, because you've just become, bigger and better and larger and a bigger embrace, and so the power is so high now. And so, I think people need to, I've always said to base leaders, what is the ministry calling on your life that, if the base leadership wasn't there, you could go straight into it. And of course, for me, it was leadership development. And so I think over the years that began to just grow underneath the other roles. And so when the roles are there, nothing changes in a sense. And so I think it's important that we differentiate between the leadership function and the ministry calling.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Thank you. That's very well put, and a good reminder. I think not to get stuck and not be, popped up even, in a role, but just like, what's my calling? That's where the energy is as well, and the passion. Steve, I've called on you a couple of times in helping build teams as well, or if I had trouble in building a team or something like that. To me, you are the team guru of Europe, at least. It's easy to throw together a team, but to make it play together, as a symphony where everybody knows their parts, and that's another thing. What do you look for when building dynamic and fruitful leadership teams in a spiritual movement like ours? You both need to have some that can figure out about the finances and legal and, just the full spread of things.
Yeah, I mean, of course, teams vary depending on whether you're in a pioneer team or whether you're an established team.
Let's take a base then.
When you're a pioneer, the vision is everything. As you come into a base, especially as the vision goes from one vision to multiplicity of vision, there's got to be a shared leadership at that point. And people say, well, what do we go for? Do we go, for this team leadership? Do we, have this convener or a couple of conveners, or, what's the important thing? And I think this whole change since 2014 is focusing much more on the gifting. So it's looking at your team and saying, what do we need? Now, YWAM is a visionary organization, or a visionary movement, I should say. And so that visionary apostolic gift is a key one. And if we don't have that presence, then the team will tend to plateau and won't last so long. So that's obviously a key gift. And the prophetic is alongside that. You see in the start of YWAM, Lauren and Joy right by his side, that apostolic and prophetic kind of lays a foundation and sees the future and makes a way forward. But then as you get established, then you need the operational leader who kind of helps to create the systems and the structures and schedules and, organizes things. And of course, then you need somebody caring for the community and building that community feel, and more of a pastoral leader. And so, I've always looked at seeing those gifts develop. Sometimes you have to kind of draw those gifts out of people. Sometimes, you don't get mature leaders just joining you and jumping straight into their gifting. So sometimes it can take time, but that's where we need some discernment to find out, if this is a potential gift, let's give some responsibility and see that gift develop and grow. But I do feel that the apostolic always needs to kind of, in a sense, be the greater of equals, if you want to talk that way.
Yeah.
To keep steering the team, in the right direction, with fresh vision and taking you where, the Lord wants you to go. But there's this sense of a shared team, so that apostolic leader isn't making all the decisions, isn't doing everything, but it's shared with the rest of that team. And so even when we talk about facilitator or convener, not everybody can facilitate. And that facilitator needs to understand all of those giftings. So if the apostolic leader isn't necessarily a great chairperson, you need a facilitator who understands the importance of bringing those gifts on at the right time.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy answer to. That's a huge question you ask, but it's we have a whole 6-week school talking.
Yes, exactly. That's true.
That's the foundation, I think. It's looking at the giftings rather than on just the position of leadership.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's another question that often shows up in forming a team as well. That's about the leader. It's do we want a facilitator? Do you want a at times it's like, no, we are just a team, we are leading together, and that it can create a vacuum as well. It's like nobody wants to, you know, stand up and show that I can take the lead or something. It creates a lot of insecurity and just kind of tiptoeing around each other in a sense. I've seen too, well, that's more when it comes to maybe decision making. How do you make decisions in a team? Is it democratic vote? Is it socialism? We are all equal and all voices, they are equally, you know, they have equal weight, even though if you came in yesterday or you've been in the mission for 15 years and have some experience and gift there. How do you make decisions in a team?
Yeah, that again, there's a maturing into becoming a team where you can work together and understand where one another's coming from. The tendency is that we look at our gift and we come into a decision-making time, and some will kind of be creating the good ideas. Others will be brainstorming with them and being innovative with those ideas. Others will be thinking, what on earth are they talking about? Let's think about some implications of what you're saying here. And someone else is saying, well, what are the facts? You know, let's talk about something concrete. And somebody else is bringing the word of the Lord, you know, and it can get very messy because you've got all these opinions coming into the mix. And of course, the answer is we have a teaching called 7 Hats on the LDC, where you have to go through each of this process all at the same time. So the person with the implications isn't waiting on the edge of their seat to say, okay, this is the problem with what you've got. Everybody has a chance to think implications. Everybody has a chance to hear the Lord. Everybody has a chance to share their feelings and their gut response to this. But the other thing, I think the other major part is growing in self-awareness. And I just wrote a little bit about this in the latest leadership letter. And there's an area called indifference, and it's not apathy, but it's a strength of being able to come to a decision without leaning yourself one way or the other. And often we come into a leadership team having thought about it beforehand. The decision is on the table, and we've already made up our mind how we're going to vote. It becomes, I'm going to share my opinion that this is the best way to go. And so to be able to grow in maturity, to come to a table and be open for whatever the Lord is wanting, you know, whichever way he wants to take you. And that takes a mature team to have that openness of heart to go either way. And I've been involved in teams where leading up to the time of prayer, they've been going in one direction. They come to that time of prayer and it totally switched. Because they've had that heart of indifference and ready to change and be willing to hear the Lord in it all. So I think that's very important, but it's hard to get there. That's overnight. And there's mentoring that needs to take place in order to get there.
Yeah, no, that's very good. And I think as you threw in as well, you know, with really take time to pray as well. I mean, so many things changes in that moment, and I've been in a lot of situations too that things just completely shift, as well as there's a heart shift, but come up with different decisions as well.
Process. It's if you don't have a clear process, it tends to go wrong. Very, very right. We have a lot of questions more here for you, but just want to encourage anybody watching this as well. I think a lot of you, if not all of you, are in leadership. If you have questions when it comes to leadership teams or just leadership, just feel free to post these questions, and we'll just take as many as we can this next half as well of our time here, or few minutes, 10 minutes. We don't have to go to exactly 5. We are going with the flow here. But Johnny, over to you.
I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there. So, I mean, it's on teams and leadership and bases. And my reflection on listening to you, is that I think every experience you have as a base leader has been had by other people, you know, and every experience of pioneering, other people have had it. You're probably not alone. You've had letters from pastors. You've been, you know, threatened that you're going to get Lauren Cunningham on you, and you know, those are all good. It's good to know that Steve Mayer's had that too. You know?
Yes.
So, when I was quite young, I was 24. I was probably a bit too young to do an LDC, but I did it, and I never regret it actually, because I think it was very formational in my leadership. It was in '99. I remember watching Man United beat Bayern Munich during that time. So sorry if any Germans watching to remind you of that. But Rite, you gave, it was the first time I'd met you, and you gave a talk on hospitality. And obviously, subsequently, I've been to your house many times for leadership gatherings, and I've seen firsthand hospitality. And I just wonder if you could, I mean, hospitality, I guess, is part of leadership. It's kind of maybe an overlooked thing, you know, but you've really modeled how to do it and why to do it. Can you unpack, like, why is it important to you, and who's influenced you in that, and, you know, where did that come from?
Sure. I think that some of us have been very blessed to have been brought up often in families or homes where it's modeled. That sure helps a lot. Steve and I both were blessed in that. I had very generous, hospitable parents. They didn't know the Lord or weren't following him in my early childhood, but they made room for people. And it didn't matter if it was somebody that maybe needed a place to stay for the month of the summertime, they would open up a space. I guess for me, growing up in that kind of an atmosphere, I saw the incredible openness of people. I saw how blessed they were. And then when my parents became followers of Jesus, well, then my mom would pile in a lot of food on the Sunday, knowing that she'd probably invite, could be 10 people back. I mean, there was 5 kids. So when you're already 7, what's another 10? I mean, that was kind of her attitude. But I'm saying that because of the context of meals, but hospitality isn't meals. I think what I picked up was her attentiveness to this, her willingness to sit and listen, to ask questions. She was a very curious lady. And you could see how precious those times were, where people felt they could just talk about really what was on their heart. There was space for them. They were valued. My mom just had a lovely way of making people feel honored. And to me, that's really what hospitality is, despite, you know, food is great. And, you know, I love cooking food, and that was obviously a big part of our retreat center. And sometimes I'd be cooking and then run down and speaking, run back up and turn ovens on and off, because food is important. The table. Jesus spent a lot of time at the table. Those table encounters were absolutely dynamic. You mustn't forget them. He had time to sit, eat, and enjoy people. I know it was the culture then. I realize it's a little different than our, you know, stop off at the takeaways. But nonetheless, he modeled something of showing value to any and everybody, and everybody could share bread. So there was something of a commonality. Nobody was left out. I think something happens at a table too. It's like we're all on the same level. You know, someone's standing up at a pulpit or preaching, or, you know, perhaps different positions or wearing uniforms. They're kind of set apart. Somehow when we all have to eat. It all goes in our mouth. We're all looking at each other. Somehow brings I don't know, just this equality. So it doesn't matter who's sitting there, what background they're from. They know the Lord or they don't, what culture they're from. I think that's, to me, a biblical model of what real hospitality looks like. We just had share a little story of in the summertime. I think celebration is such a huge part of that. I think often we get a little busy and we don't celebrate enough. And I think celebration should be such a huge part. It's honoring people. It's speaking words over people's lives that they'll never forget. It's powerful. We hadn't been with our family, and our sons were coming, and we thought of all the things that we wished we'd been able to celebrate. Birthdays. We've been married 40 years. There'd been, I think, finishing university. Just you know, markers, important markers in our kids' lives that we had an opportunity. I didn't know what the date was. We just set a time when they were with us. We got some champagne. We said, this will be a time of toast. We want to speak out, things to one another, are meaningful. And I just realized that in that gathering, there we were all together. Because remember, celebration can also be part of sorrow. It isn't always. So it began actually with sorrow, because our daughter-in-law reminded us, she said, I'm sure none of you knew this, but it's 8 years today that my mom died. So actually, I want to give a toast. She just spoke about her gratitude of a mother. She said, I didn't know what it was like to be a mother till recently. And I realized, oh my gosh, I just want to say my mom gave her very best to my sister and I. And it was just so honoring. Okay, we're all crying by then. And it was just one of those evenings you can't script. You can't give everyone a script to say, okay, this is what you need to say, and hopefully that will happen. You set the environment, and you're trusting that God is going to use this to speak positive words, and it was powerful. There was one girl there who is just a new friend of ours, and her eyes are just filled with tears. She's not a believer really at this point, and she goes, I've never been at a table where I've heard words like this spoken. I've never been in an atmosphere like this. This is like, whoa. And she didn't actually know how to embrace it. And I realized, boy, this was a God moment here where the Holy Spirit was reminding us of words and encouragements and things that we could speak over one another. I just felt that evening kind of embodied what hospitality is.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it doesn't need all the frills, all the menus, all the decorations. But boy, does it need people attentive to one another and speaking words where people feel I've left completely different.
Thanks, Rite. Yeah, I mean, it's hard on a Zoom chat to kind of show people hospitality, or the hospitality that the gift that you have, other than your body language. But I can definitely testify to, I mean, I probably went to Malaga, I don't know, 10, 15 times for a week, near 4-day kind of gatherings. And I'd say some of the most significant times were these moments where you both would have prepared an extravagant feast, a big paella dish, and there might have been a nice beverage there, and we sat around. I remember one particular time, 30 YWAM Western European leaders all just ate, and then one by one we affirmed each other, and just very moving times that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't created that kind of space of grace, that space of hospitality. As our friends down the road, the Benedictine monks, they always say they welcome everyone that comes to their doors like Jesus himself. And I think I experienced that in your house as well, which I suppose for us as YWAM can be a far cry. That sometimes we create bases and we have labels on everything. Don't touch this, don't do that, shut the door afterwards. And it's very institutional. And somehow you managed to accommodate 30 people, but always made it feel like a home, which I think would be a challenge for us as YWAM in Europe. How do we make our bases and teams those kind of spaces? So, okay, we just have a couple more questions to go. Maybe I just quickly say there was one question about events in America. We'll touch that next week. Next week we've got Tim Svoboda coming on. Tim, for a long time, kind of was the kind of the YWAM International Cities director or guru or whatever, and he kind of still is that. He still kind of runs around challenging people to go and pioneer in cities, and he's an amazing guy. He pioneered in Chennai in the south of India for about 30 years and then moved to San Francisco, and is doing amazing stuff there. So, and maybe another young American urban leader will kind of come on that podcast too. So it'll be same time next week, a chance to kind of really connect with some amazing stuff that YWAMers in North America are doing at this time. One other question that came on Facebook yesterday for maybe you both was this from Elia Casper. She said, what practices, methods, or systems have you developed over the years in prioritizing your time to be in missions for the long haul and not a short race? That is personal time, couple time, family time, community, ministry, church, world. Probably a lot you could say there as well, but is there a couple of pointers you could throw in on that?
Maybe I could just say about friendships, very important. I would add that friendships that are not necessarily in the mission, whether it's local church, other missionaries. We just met with 11 different people last night that are different agencies and missions. I think having that breadth of friendship sometimes helps give you another perspective when you get kind of locked into your own areas. I found that very refreshing. We often had pastors, people we were very close to that, it just gave us encouragement and saw things maybe from a very different viewpoint. A very, very helpful thing for us. So right through, I think our whole married and family life, we were always strongly connected into a local church, strongly connected in with small groups, cells, as well as often we had a lovely couple who would be willing to spend several hours with us, Steve, at least every 6 months, and just talk about our family, our marriage, and just be available to us wise, at least another maybe 15 years on us or 20 years. We just found that invaluable. And we could be honest, we could talk about things. It was nice having someone outside of our context of YWAM, and they just gave us such support. We had to push them to take us on. They said, no, we haven't got anything. Oh, you do, you must. So you have to encourage that relationship.
I think when you're in a mission like YWAM and you're wanting to be in it for the long haul, you can't set some kind of schedule and hope it's going to last for a long time. There's adjustments all along the way. So we did have quite a rhythm of, debriefing every year, finding out what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to change. Some of that kind of went through our whole lives, really. So, making sure we have date nights and having, devotions together and some basic things that, kept us kind of on the straight and narrow. But probably evaluating regularly just to switch things up if they're not working. Yeah. And knowing if community life is right for us and when to step in and when to step out, we've been in and out all our lives, knowing, hearing from the Lord when to do what. And I think that's quite important. So, because when you're in missions, you have to think about your family as well as you. And I think sometimes we've made some errors there where we've only been thinking about ourselves and not the kids. And so they haven't had a sense of calling to this. So we've got to bring them, into the mix.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's even in the other end of life as well that I'm facing at the moment, having an elderly mother, it's like, I didn't have the calling, to have you go into missions and all over. So I think you feel it in both ends of life, of the scale, maybe.
Is that sometimes when you're in a family, it's the family that sacrifices for the mission.
Yes.
But I think you have to bring a balance so that sometimes the mission is sacrificed for the family. It's just knowing which and when.
Exactly. Totally agree. Good. Now, since we have you here, and you are the founder of the ELLC, and we have this website that will be launched in September. So, of course, we love to hear just some thoughts from you. I mean, why are you doing this? What's the motivation? What's the drive behind it? And what is it?
I think I probably got close to it, during this hour. But when we first came into YWAM, we were launched into our first team was a mobile team, and the leader said, "Well, that sounds like a good idea. Go for it." So there was no training, no idea of what we should do and how we should do it. So we unfortunately it went well. And then when we took on other ministries, there was no encouragement, no mentoring, national role, a similar thing until. I stepped down into England, and I realized soon that YWAM's method of mentoring was go to a school. And so, first thing we did was go to LTS. But we enjoyed the LTS. We had a great time. But we realized that the best kind of learning is ongoing and in the sense of community. And so the whole name, European Leaders Learning Community, the desire is that we learn from one another in the 4 levels, so it's emerging leaders, potential leaders, team leaders, area leaders, and elders, all in it together, learning from one another and passing on wisdom. And so much from our kids. So, we know that's possible.
Oh, yeah.
We never stop learning. And so, yeah, we would love this to be something that enables young and old to get together and find one another. So I think sometimes it's hard to know, who do I go to? And so we want to present some possibilities for you on the site of who could be a coach, who could be someone to debrief, who can mentor. Here's resources of all kinds that you can find. You need a speaker for school, go there and find somebody. And then, regular input, videos, interviews. So yeah, it's a work in progress again. So we're starting with a certain kind of look, but depending on what's working, we'll adapt it to your needs, because that's what we want it for, to be for the community. So yeah, watch this space.
Wonderful.
Let's know how it's going.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the website is getting more and more beautiful, I can say. So it's going not just beautiful, great content. Of course, I have to ask, it's summer now. Will there be a t-shirt? Will there be an ELLC t-shirt, Steve?
I'm sure there will be.
Okay. Our final question that we're also trying to ask everyone every week, that is, what are the books that you're reading at the moment? What are you learning? What's on there? Yeah, on the shelf.
This is there it is. Heroic Leadership by Chris Lowney. It's a book about the Jesuits, and that's what I wrote about in this last leadership letter. The most amazing team. They've been functioning for 450 years. And Chris, in writing this book, he's comparing it with companies today and saying what an amazing group they were, and looking at the 4 values that made them function. And you'll see a lot of connections with YWAM in it. It's a fascinating book, so I'd encourage you to look at that.
Something that we have been using, this is, of course, every single year, Sacred Space, the prayer book. This is also by the Jesuits. We have loved this. So that's our devotional that we do together. We have our own times as well, but this has been, it's more along the Lectio Divina style, but it's so well written, and the Gospels, of course, follows the church calendar. We've found that just a treasure. Yeah. We've recommended it to a few others, and others have said, so inspiring. I could certainly recommend that.
Another one is There's Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. You'll know his name from Boundaries. And this, of course, this speaks into the pruning that we've just gone through. And he talks about the need of bringing an end to some things. And we tend to kind of shy away from sometimes cutting something off or letting something die, dealing with it. And so it's in management, a lot of management stories, but it's very relevant for where we're at, and especially with this word on pruning. You'll find that very helpful.
Wonderful. Yeah, I see you. Is there another one?
Okay, for fun. This is a fun one because I read it on the plane about 2 years ago. Pray Like a Gourmet.
Oh.
It is. I decided that this year I wanted to do all the exercises. And I'm telling you, there's probably, I'm thinking, about 100 exercises to do. It's an excellent book, touching on all kinds of different spiritual disciplines. He's a character, David Brazil.
Very creative.
Very creative. If you like the arts, if you enjoy doing an actual hands-on journal, I do use one on my iPad, but I really enjoy doing this. Something for me, I think it just settles a lot deeper in my spirit when I'm actually engaging with materials. So that's a really, it's a treat, that one.
Wow, wonderful. I want to get hold of that. And I want to say thank you to Rebecca. I see that she's posting the links to these books on Amazon. So it's all there. Yeah. Johnny, were you about saying something?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, if Steve maybe could add some books, but I hear that somebody's already doing it. But if there's any other books that either of you wanted to recommend, they'll be there. And I'm sure when the ELLC website gets up, there'll be a whole section on resources and books. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
You can't put 100 there though, Steve. Only 5.
We'll have a couple of books a month we'll recommend.
Well, I want to say thank you for this time. It's been very rich, and thank you for watching as well, joining us, everyone. As for every time, it will be available on Facebook. It will be there. You can go back and relearn. We just heard that it's lifelong learning, and it will also be posted on the website when that's ready. But thank you so much, and just appreciate you so much. I think Stephe and Rite, you should go back and just look at all the comments. There's a lot of love coming your way. You're on the live stream, so please do that. But otherwise, thank you for now, and looking forward to see hopefully many of you next week with Tim Swoboda as well.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for now. Bye.
See you. Bye.